What if the empire you spent your life building was never meant for you to rule? Naomi Caldwell, a visionary, a warrior, a self-made CEO, walked into her own company's luxury showroom in Palm Beach, not as a titan of industry, but as a stranger in disguise. No fanfare, no recognition, just silence, the kind of silence that follows someone society chooses not to see. She stood still, quietly absorbing the cold, dismissive glances, the averted eyes, and the subtle shift of attention that never landed on her. They didn't know her name. They didn't see her worth. But they would. What began as one woman's quiet walk into a showroom would soon become a war, a battle not just for her company, but for something far deeper. Dignity, truth, and the fight against a system quietly rigged to exclude her. This wasn't just business. This was personal. Naomi had always lived in the in-between, a place where excellence wasn't just expected, it was demanded in double. At 42, her journey from a modest upbringing in Atlanta to the peak of the private aviation world had come at a cost. She had walked into boardrooms with her mother's strength in her spine and her father's hope stitched into every decision. But no matter how many barriers she broke, the whispers never ceased. The subtle disbelief, the unspoken doubt. Even as CEO, she could still feel it, hidden behind polished smiles and empty praise. On this day, Caldwell Aviation was preparing for its most ambitious launch yet, a new fleet of elite jets poised to redefine luxury air travel. Media outlets, investors, and industry power players were en route. The pressure was suffocating. Every detail needed to be perfect, yet beneath the surface buzz, there were quiet rumbles, rumors Naomi couldn't ignore. It started with a conversation, quiet but piercing. Darrell Jackson, her closest ally, her moral compass, had come to her with a truth she didn't want to face. "There's a pattern," he told her, standing in the doorway of her sleek, sunlit office. "Clients of color, unless they're famous, aren't treated the same." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "You think my people are discriminating?" "I think they're human," Terrell said, "and bias. It doesn't always shout. Sometimes it whispers, and we stop hearing it." She wanted to reject it, to believe that her company was better. But deep inside, a voice whispered, "What if it's true?" That afternoon, she traded her tailored power suit for anonymity. Dark jeans, a crisp blouse, no chauffeur, no press entourage, just Naomi, a customer. She entered her own showroom like any other potential buyer, and what she saw, what she felt, would shatter her assumptions. No greetings, no eye contact, no acknowledgement. Instead, a polished salesman moved straight toward a white man who walked in after her, grinning like he'd found royalty. Naomi watched, not as a CEO, but as a black woman, invisible in a space she built with her own hands. She approached the front desk, still no recognition, not a smile, not even a glance. Then came the salesman, Ethan, young, confident, dismissive. "Maybe you'd like to start with our more affordable models," he suggested, scanning her like a barcode. She didn't flinch. "Actually, I want your best. Price isn't an issue." But the tone didn't change. His words lacked depth. His eyes wandered. He spoke specifications like reading off a menu he didn't care for. Until she heard it, whispers behind her back. "He's probably just browsing, you know how it is. They never buy, just wasting time." Each word sliced through her. She had fought for this company, built it, bled for it, and yet here she was, reduced to a stereotype in the eyes of her own team. She didn't storm out. She didn't raise her voice. She stayed, observed, calculated. Another customer walked in, white, in a tailored suit. Within seconds, Ethan and another associate greeted him with a warmth Naomi never received. They offered a flight demonstration without hesitation. No qualifications, no doubt. Naomi stepped forward. "I'd like to schedule a demonstration as well," she said. Ethan turned, barely masking his disdain. "I'm sorry, those are reserved for VIP clients." She paused, just for a breath. Then, with quiet fire, she met his eyes. "I am the VIP," she said, "and this is my company." Naomi didn't blink. Her voice was steady. "That gentleman just walked in, and you didn't ask if he was a VIP before offering him a demonstration." Ethan froze. His practiced charm faltered, his smile thinning into discomfort. "Well, we know most of our VIP clients. It's standard practice." But Naomi said nothing. She let the silence breathe, let it crawl under his skin. Across the room, Rachel, still standing behind the front desk, fidgeted with a clipboard, clearly unsettled. Naomi saw it, the internal conflict flickering in the younger woman's eyes. Rachel knew, and now she was wondering what would happen if she dared to speak up. Naomi didn't push. Not yet. Instead, she walked. Her heels echoed across the marble like a slow metronome, pacing her rising fury. Each click of her stride was a choice. To remain calm, to remain composed, to absorb the truth of what she was witnessing. She observed everything. The way sales reps lit up when white customers entered, how their postures straightened, their smiles widened. She noted how they lingered, laughed, engaged. But when a black couple walked in, elegant, assured, clearly affluent, the entire tone of the showroom shifted. Silence. They weren't greeted. They weren't welcomed. They were met with stillness, as though their presence had cracked a glass nobody wanted to clean up. The husband stepped forward eventually, dignified but visibly confused by the cold reception. A young salesman approached, with the enthusiasm of a man being asked to take out the trash. "Can I help you?" he asked flatly, not bothering to step closer. The black man replied evenly, "We're interested in your premium aircraft." The salesman grabbed a brochure like it was a get-out-of-work card. "All the specs are here. Let me know if you've got questions." That was it. No pitch, no tour, no offer of coffee, just a paper and a polite brush-off. Naomi clenched her jaw. Her blood simmered. Across the room, a white customer was being ushered into a private consultation lounge, his laughter filling the air, followed by a chorus of obliging salesmen. This wasn't a fluke. This was a culture. Naomi pivoted toward the front desk. Rachel, still pretending to flip through papers, startled when Naomi leaned in slightly and said quietly, "Not all customers are treated the same, are they?" Rachel stiffened. I don't know what you mean." Naomi's eyes narrowed gently. "You hesitated earlier. When Ethan dismissed me, you looked uncomfortable. Am I wrong?" Rachel's hands tightened around the clipboard. Her voice dropped, barely above a whisper. Maybe you should look somewhere else." Naomi remained unshaken. "Why?" Rachel looked down. "Because I can't change how things work here." Naomi absorbed that. Rachel wasn't the villain. She was a product of the environment, someone who had learned that silence protected paychecks. "And who decided that?" Naomi asked, softly. "I just follow orders," Rachel replied. That was all Naomi needed to hear. Before she could speak again, a voice sliced through the tension, a deep, smug baritone with the weight of authority. "Well, now, this is interesting." Naomi turned to see a man in his late 50s suit expensive but dated, graying hair slicked back, smile practiced and hollow. Richard Whitmore, the head of sales. The gatekeeper. He looked her over like one might assess a stain on a white shirt. "You sure you're in the right place?" he said. "Private jets aren't exactly everyday purchases." Naomi didn't flinch. And who gets to decide that? Richard chuckled, looking toward Ethan. We like to focus on serious buyers. Can't waste time with people who aren't the right fit. Naomi tilted her head. And by right fit you mean? Let's not make this about something it's not, Richard said quickly. But Naomi was done pretending. She reached into her blazer, pulled out her phone, and walked to the center of the showroom like it was a battlefield. Her voice was low but sharp. I need a full report on last year's sales, broken down by customer demographics. I want data on response times, completion rates, and rejection statistics. The room went still. Even the customers paused mid-conversation. Richard's jaw tensed, but he still didn't understand. Not fully. And who exactly do you think you are to demand that? He asked. Naomi met his gaze. I'm the one who signs your paycheck. It landed like thunder. The silence that followed was absolute. Ethan looked stricken. Rachel's mouth parted in shock. Richard's bravado cracked, ever so slightly. He tried to recover. I think you're twisting this. Naomi cut him off. Explain why black clients get brochures while white clients get private tours. Explain why Ethan assumed I couldn't afford top-tier aircraft. Explain why VIP demonstrations are for some, but not all. Richard fumbled. Our system works. No, Naomi interrupted. It works for you. It doesn't work for everyone. Rachel stepped forward, voice trembling but clear. She's right. I've worked here 3 years. This happens all the time. It's not an accident. Richard turned on her. Rachel, don't. But she stood tall. I won't lie anymore. More employees exchanged glances, shifting uncomfortably. The fear in the room was real, but so was the truth. You're making a mistake, Richard hissed. Our real customers don't want things to change. Naomi stepped closer. Then they're not our real customers. He took a final step toward her, desperate. You can't just dismantle an entire structure overnight. Naomi leaned in, her voice a blade wrapped in velvet. Watch me. Then she turned to her staff. As of this moment, this showroom is closed for internal review. Every sale, every interaction, under the microscope. If we find bias, we fix it. Some employees looked horrified, others looked liberated. Richard was livid. You're going to ruin us. Naomi leaned close again, this time with a quiet finality. If you think this is what ruins us, then you were never here to protect this company. And with that she turned, walked to the exit, and left behind the only kind of silence that mattered. One full of reckoning. Outside, the Florida sun greeted her like a promise. But the war wasn't over. Richard would fight back. The old guard never falls quietly. Naomi knew the real battle was just beginning. Claudia's voice was quiet but urgent. Emergency board meeting, 30 minutes. Naomi inhaled slowly, placing her bag on her desk with deliberate calm. She had expected this. Richard Whitmore wouldn't fade quietly into the background, not when his power was on the line. What's the tone? She asked. Claudia hesitated. Mixed. Some sound alarmed, others, they're sharpening knives. Naomi gave a slight nod, already shifting into strategy mode. She had cracked open a vault of truth the company had kept sealed for decades, and now she had to defend that truth against those who saw progress not as growth, but as a threat. She straightened her blazer, steeling herself. 30 minutes wasn't enough to prepare. But then again, she had spent a lifetime preparing for this. The boardroom was a sleek, imposing chamber, floor-to-ceiling glass overlooking the gleaming skyline, a cold monument to power and prestige. The long glass table, surrounded by high-backed leather chairs, was now filled with some of the most influential minds in the aviation industry. Naomi walked in with quiet force. At the far end sat Richard, lounging with the relaxed smugness of a man who still thought the game was his. The chairman, William Cartwright, cleared his throat. "Let's get to it. Naomi, we understand you made a decision today that directly impacted operations. We need to talk about the implications." Naomi nodded, fingers clasped in front of her. "Of course." Judith Lawson, one of the more senior members, leaned forward. "We've been flooded with calls. Clients are confused. Some are worried. Richard's brought forward concerns we have to consider." Richard took his cue. "With all due respect," he began, his voice falsely diplomatic. "Shutting down a fully operational showroom without consulting the board sends the wrong message. It undermines the trust we've built for decades." Naomi met his gaze head-on. "And what message would that be, Richard? That we don't tolerate discrimination?" Richard's chuckle was low and dismissive. "This wasn't about discrimination. It was about prioritizing high-value clients. That's not bias. It's business." Naomi didn't react immediately. She let the moment stretch, made sure her voice was composed when she finally spoke. "And how exactly do we determine who is high value? Is it income, credit history, or the color of their skin?" The silence was immediate. The room, filled with educated, powerful people, suddenly had no answers. Richard's jaw tensed, but before he could fire back, another board member, Gregory Tate, leaned forward. "We understand your intentions, Naomi, but the company's been successful operating this way. A dramatic shift risks alienating our most loyal clients." Naomi leaned back in her chair, measured and composed. "Then perhaps we need to rethink who we call loyal, because if their loyalty depends on us maintaining exclusionary practices, that's not a foundation worth preserving." Another ripple moved through the room. Surprise, discomfort, maybe even realization. Judith adjusted in her seat, hesitant. "Can we afford to make this kind of moral shift without damaging the bottom line?" Naomi was ready. "We're living in an age of transparency. Companies that refuse to evolve are devoured by public accountability. We have two choices: lead the industry into a better future or become the next cautionary tale." The room absorbed her words. Richard didn't speak immediately, but then he leaned forward, sliding a sleek folder across the table. "Let's talk numbers. One of our top-tier clients backed out of a purchase today. A $90 million 0-cents deal. Canceled. After the showroom shut down." Naomi opened the folder and read the note. It was real, but her expression didn't falter. "And you're certain this was about today?" "I have no doubt," Richard replied smugly. Whispers spread across the table. Doubt crept in. Naomi could feel it, the way fear clutched at logic. Richard had turned one client into a weapon. She wouldn't let it pierce the truth. "Calm client," Naomi said calmly, tapping the folder. "That's Richard's entire case. But how many clients have we lost, quietly, because they felt unwelcome, unseen, unwelcome in our showrooms? How many walked out before ever meeting a salesperson?" She let the silence press down again. "I won't lead a company that ignores those losses, because they're harder to count." The boardroom quieted, but Naomi knew this was just one victory in a longer war. Later, she sat in her office as the sun dipped behind the skyline. The sky was painted gold, but the air felt cold. That board meeting had exposed the real war, one not of money, but of control. Richard wouldn't rest, and neither would she. "A knock. Come in." It was Terrell, his face serious. "We need a new strategy. Richard's not sticking to boardrooms. He's going to play dirty." Naomi nodded. "He's already calling me a threat to the company's financial stability." "Then we fight fire with facts. We dig. We find the proof. If there's bias, there's a paper trail. And I think we already have someone ready to talk." Midnight. Naomi's phone buzzed with an unknown number. "Hello?" A quiet voice, nervous. "It's Rachel." Naomi sat up. Are you okay? I don't know. But I have something you need to see. An hour later, Naomi met Rachel in a near-empty cafe. The young woman looked exhausted, eyes darting as if watching for shadows. From her purse, Rachel pulled a flash drive and laid it on the table like a bomb. This has emails from Richard, from the team, instructions, real instructions, to prioritize white clients, to steer others away from top-tier models. Naomi didn't touch it, yet. You're sure? Rachel nodded. I knew something was wrong, but this, seeing it written down, I can't be silent anymore. Naomi picked up the drive. Thank you. You did the right thing. The next morning, Naomi stood beside Terrell in a packed conference room. The emails were projected on a massive screen. Lines of text, instructions, racist patterns laid bare in bullet points in corporate jargon. Her voice didn't waver. This is the truth. These policies weren't official, but they were real. We built a system designed to welcome some and quietly push others out. She clicked to the next slide. Charts, statistics. Clients of color wait 40% longer for service. Over 70% of our biggest transactions are with hand-selected white buyers. This isn't a fluke. It's a culture. Richard sat stiffly. Then, voice tight, he said, This doesn't prove anything. Sales reps make calls based on instinct. Naomi played a recording. Richard's own voice filled the room. We don't need to waste time on people outside our demographic. They're not our market. Board members turned. Faces shifted, some in disbelief, some in fury. The tide was turning, but Richard wouldn't go quietly. By the next morning, headlines screamed across every financial platform. Naomi Caldwell's radical agenda threatens Caldwell Aviation. Billionaires pull out over CEO's political crusade. Company in crisis, twisted truths, distorted quotes. A smear campaign crafted for maximum fear. Claudia held out a tablet. Richard leaked it. Of course he had. Just then, her phone buzzed again. Emergency board meeting, noon. Terrell was already in her office. He's fast. And smarter than we thought. Naomi looked at him. Then we outmaneuver him. And Terrell had a plan. They wouldn't just defend the truth. They'd expose the rot on a public stage and let the world decide. Step 1 was control. Not of fear, but of truth. Step 2, voices. Rachel, and soon others, came forward with first-hand accounts. These weren't vague accusations. They were precise, undeniable. Names, dates, instructions, evidence of a culture carefully curated under Richard Whitmore's reign, where exclusion wasn't an accident but a directive. Step 3, allies. Naomi wasn't alone. Powerful black executives, progressive entrepreneurs, and legacy builders stood with her. Quiet supporters now stepped into the light, declaring publicly that Naomi's vision wasn't a threat, it was the future. Terrell, ever the strategist, leaned forward and said, "They wanted a scandal? Good, let's give them one. But this time, we own the narrative." Naomi nodded, the fire in her eyes unwavering. If Richard wants to play dirty, we bury him with the truth. It was time to go public. She sat under the intense lights of CNBC's flagship business program, every angle carefully captured by high-definition cameras. Across from her sat Daniel Pierce, a journalist known for grilling CEOs into submission. His expression was unreadable as he flipped through notes, eyes sharp with anticipation. "Mrs. Caldwell," he began, his tone polite but loaded, "there's growing concern that your new policies are driving away key clients and endangering Caldwell Aviation's financial future. Why make this shift now?" Naomi folded her hands, her tone poised and composed. The idea that we're losing business because we're finally treating every client equally is not only misleading, it's dangerous. If fairness makes some clients uncomfortable, then we must ask, why does equality feel threatening? The studio hushed. Even Pierce, ever skeptical, paused for just a beat. But the numbers, he pressed. Don't lie. Some long-standing clients have already withdrawn. Doesn't that prove financial risk? Naomi didn't flinch. The numbers do tell a story, just not the one Richard Whitmore wants to spin. Behind her, charts filled the screen, color-coded breakdowns, percentages, timelines. Over the last 5 years, Black and Latino customers waited 40% longer for service. Their inquiries were dismissed more frequently. Even verified buyers were often steered away from premium models. This wasn't random, it was policy. Gasps echoed through the studio as another slide appeared. An email from Richard himself. Focus on buyers who match our core demographic. Don't waste time. Daniel leaned in. You're saying this came from Richard directly? Naomi's voice was clear. Yes, and it wasn't just one email. It was a culture, quiet, calculated, and enforced. Then she turned to the side of the stage. Let's hear from someone who lived it. Rachel emerged, face pale but determined. She took her seat beside Naomi, her voice shaking at first, then strengthening as truth poured out. I worked in one of our most prestigious showrooms, and I was told directly to discourage Black clients, to steer them toward lower-end models, even when they were wealthier than our white clients. She paused, then continued firmer now. I didn't see it as discrimination at first. I thought, that's just how luxury sales worked. But then I watched millionaires walk out, disrespected, and I realized I was part of the problem. Daniel Pierce turned back to Naomi. So what happens now? Naomi lifted her chin. Now we rebuild. Caldwell Aviation will be known for excellence and equity. We're not losing clients. We're earning the trust of those who've been excluded for far too long. By the time the segment aired, it ignited a cultural firestorm. Twitter exploded, Reddit threads broke down her data, LinkedIn lit up with praise and with backlash. But something extraordinary happened. Voices that had long been silenced began to rise. Thousands of comments flooded the company's pages. This happened to me. I walked into your showroom once and walked right back out. Finally, someone said it out loud. And then came the game changer. A coalition of Black and Latino entrepreneurs publicly backed Naomi, offering not just words, but financial support, investments, commitments. A new market of high-net-worth clients who had been overlooked for decades now saw in Naomi not just a CEO, but a revolution. Meanwhile, Richard Whitmore watched from behind the glass walls of his office, the media wildfire burning through his carefully built facade. He slammed a fist on the desk. Naomi hadn't folded. She'd multiplied. Desperate, he called his final card, Preston Lancaster. Old money, old power, and deeply invested in keeping things exactly as they were. Their meeting was held at the Belmont Club, a sanctuary of inherited privilege. Over aged bourbon and dim lights, Richard made his pitch. She's reckless, he told Preston. She's turning this into a political circus. Preston sipped slowly. If this spreads, if this new way of thinking takes root, it'll bleed into every sector I do business with. Richard nodded. Then you know what you have to do. The next morning, headlines blared. Millionaire Preston Lancaster threatens to pull $200.00 in contracts from Caldwell Aviation. Lancaster keep politics out of business. Naomi was summoned to the boardroom within hours. Donald Hayes, visibly tense, wasted no time. Preston's threatening mass withdrawal. This could destroy us. Naomi sat, her hands steady. Then maybe Preston was never an ally, maybe he was our greatest liability. The boardroom murmured. Fear still gripped them. Richard leaned back, smug. "You're playing with fire, Naomi." She stared him down. "Then I'll light the match myself." Later that night, as she approached her car, Naomi spotted it, an envelope tucked beneath the windshield. Inside, know when to stop. No one challenges the system without consequences. Her heart pounded. She scanned the lot. Empty. At home, she sat across from Terrell, who read the note with dark eyes. "This isn't just a threat," he said. "This is a warning, from the kind of people who don't care about stock prices." Naomi nodded. "Then it means I'm finally getting close." But she wasn't naive. The cost was rising. Fear curled at the edges of her thoughts. The next morning she made the call herself. "Mr. Lancaster," she said coolly. "It's time we spoke directly." He hesitated, then said flatly, "There's nothing left to discuss." Naomi's voice never wavered. "Then consider this a negotiation." An hour later, she walked into the Belmont Club, a lioness among relics. The air was thick with cigar smoke and entitlement. Preston didn't rise as she approached. He simply motioned toward the chair across from him. "You've made quite the mess, Miss Caldwell." Naomi sat, folding her hands calmly. "No, I've exposed it." And now the final battle would begin. Naomi remained poised, her posture straight and voice steady. "A mess?" she repeated. "No, Mr. Lancaster, I'd call it a long overdue correction." Preston chuckled, swirling the amber liquid in his glass. "You mistake my concern. I'm not opposed to fairness," he said, voice smooth like the bourbon he sipped. "What I oppose is chaos, disruption. This industry is built on relationships, on trust. You don't just rewrite the rules overnight." Naomi met his gaze with cool precision. "By stability, you mean maintaining a system where some are prioritized while others are quietly excluded?" Preston exhaled, the faintest flicker of annoyance flashing across his features. "I'm not your villain, Miss Caldwell. I don't dislike people like you. I dislike volatility. And that's what you've brought." Naomi leaned in. "Interesting," she said calmly. "Because the only people calling this chaos are the ones who benefited from the silence." His face darkened. "You think you're untouchable?" he asked, voice low and sharp. "You're pushing out the people who built this industry, our money, our vision. We are your most loyal clients." Naomi didn't flinch. Instead, she reached into her briefcase and slid a thin, crisp folder across the table. "Are you?" Preston frowned, opening the folder. His eyes scanned the contents, and his face shifted. "What is this?" he asked, though he already knew. "Facts," Naomi replied coolly. "A financial breakdown. My team pulled the numbers. Your contracts account for less than 7% of Caldwell Aviation's total revenue." She paused, letting that land. "You're not the backbone of this company, Mr. Lancaster. You're a chapter in a story that's evolving, and your exit won't break us. It will liberate us." Preston was silent for a long beat. Then, with a thin smile, he placed the folder down. "You came prepared," he said quietly. "I always do. You really believe you can win this?" Naomi rose slowly, adjusting her blazer. "I don't have to win. I just refuse to lose." She turned to leave. Just before the door, Preston called after her. "For what it's worth, I don't think you're as naive as Richard does." Naomi looked back, her voice calm but sharp as glass. "Then you should know. I don't make empty threats." And she walked out. Across town, Richard was pacing in his office when the call came. "Preston," he answered quickly. "I met with Caldwell," came the low voice on the other end. "She's not what you think." Richard stopped in his tracks. "We had an agreement." I agree to voice concern, not to back a losing war." The line went dead. Richard's breath caught. He looked down at the phone in disbelief. His strongest ally had just walked. Naomi wasn't just surviving anymore. She was dismantling him. That night, Naomi walked out of Caldwell Aviation's glass tower. The sky was clear, but the air felt different. Off. She adjusted her coat as she crossed the quiet lot. Her mind should have been on the win. Instead, something gnawed at her instincts. Then she saw it. A black SUV idling at the edge of the lot. It hadn't been there that morning. She didn't hesitate. She got into her car, locked the doors, started the engine. The low hum filled the silence, but her heartbeat stayed loud. She pulled out. The SUV stayed still, until she turned onto the road. Then it followed. Left turn. It followed. Right, still there. A detour through a narrow side street. No change. Her knuckles tightened on the wheel. Calm. Stay calm. Then, just as she reached the intersection, boom, the SUV swerved. Right into her lane. She jerked the wheel with everything she had, tires screeching as her car skidded to the shoulder. The SUV sped past, disappearing into the night like a ghost. Her breath came in gasps, her pulse erratic. But something fluttered on her windshield. A piece of paper. She stepped out, snatched it, and unfolded it with trembling fingers. Thick black ink. Stop now, while you still can. This isn't worth dying for. Naomi stood there in the silence of the street, reading it again and again. So this was their next move. Terrell was furious. "You're going to the police." Naomi sat calmly behind her desk, eyes steady. Terrell froze. "No, Naomi. They just tried to kill you." "I know," she said quietly, "and that's why I can't stop." Terrell's voice cracked. "This isn't business anymore, it's your life." Naomi inhaled, slow and controlled. If they're willing to escalate, it means they're desperate. It means the system is breaking. That makes them dangerous. But it also means I'm close. He slammed his hand on the table. "You're the most stubborn woman I've ever met." She almost smiled. That's why you trust me." He exhaled. "Fine, but you're getting security." Naomi finally nodded. "Agreed, but I won't be intimidated." She turned toward the window, the city glowing in the dark. This wasn't just a corporate battle anymore. This was war. She walked into the boardroom the next morning with fire behind her eyes and a faint bruise on her forehead that said more than words could. William Cartwright spoke first. "Naomi, we're aware of what happened last night. We take it seriously." Donald Hayes added, "This has gone too far. This isn't a boardroom dispute anymore." Naomi nodded. "No, it's not. It's the breaking point. This company must choose. Continue a legacy of silence, or finally stand for something real." The room shifted. Richard sneered. "You're all being played. She's using sympathy to manipulate you." Donald turned sharply. "Someone tried to kill her, Richard." "Please," Richard scoffed. "She's playing the victim while dragging this company through hell." Naomi leaned forward, her voice calm but deadly. "You keep saying I'm destroying Caldwell Aviation, but I see a company waking up for the first time in decades. And you're just afraid of what happens when the lights come on." Richard's face twisted in anger. Then Elizabeth Monroe, cold and certain, spoke up. "I propose a vote, effective immediately, removal of Richard Whitmore as head of sales." Silence. Then, one by one, the hands went up. First Donald, then Elizabeth, then William, then everyone else. Even Richard's closest allies, faltered. Unanimous. Richard stood, breath shallow, eyes burning. "You think this is over?" he hissed at Naomi. She met his gaze. "No, I think this is where it really begins." He left without another word. Naomi didn't sleep that night. Her phone buzzed at dawn. It was Claudia's name. "Turn on the TV," she said. There it was. Breaking. CEO Naomi Caldwell sued for reverse discrimination. Billionaire clients join lawsuit. De que cautionner. Is she destroying the company's legacy? The news anchor's voice was sharp. Former executive Richard Whitmore has filed a formal lawsuit against Naomi Caldwell, claiming her policies deliberately marginalized long-standing clients in favor of political ideology. Then, footage of Richard outside the courthouse. This isn't personal. This is about preserving integrity. Naomi Caldwell has alienated the very people who built this company, and that's dangerous. Naomi stared at the screen, jaw tight. So this was his last move. He couldn't beat her with allies. He couldn't scare her off the road. Now he'd try to bury her in court. But he'd made one last miscalculation. Naomi Caldwell didn't run. He rewrote the rules. Naomi watched the headlines with a cold stillness. Richard wasn't trying to win anymore. He was trying to rewrite history, to smear her legacy in ink and fear. His lawsuit wasn't about the law. It was about erasure. By the time she stepped through the doors of Caldwell Aviation, the halls whispered with tension. Employees averted their gazes. Conversations died mid-sentence. She had become both a symbol and a target. In her office, Terrell didn't mince words. "It's worse than we thought. Richard isn't just suing you, he's weaponizing his entire network to paint you as the villain." Naomi remained still. "How strong is his case?" "Legally," Terrell scoffed, "it's trash. But that's not the point. He's playing the court of public opinion, not the judge's bench." Naomi turned toward the city skyline beyond her window. "He wants to make me the face of corporate destruction." Exactly. The black CEO who made it all about race and tanked a legacy. It's the perfect story. If we let this turn into a war of emotions, we lose. Naomi's voice hardened. Then we don't play his game. We rewrite the narrative. By noon, news networks had picked up the lawsuit. Business analysts debated her leadership live. Some questioned her vision. Others defended it as righteous. The board called for an emergency meeting, the anxiety thick in their voices. "I support what you're doing," Donald Hayes said. "But the optics, this lawsuit, the headlines, it's making investors uneasy." Elizabeth Monroe nodded. "We need to stabilize the company's image. Now." Naomi stood her ground. "Backing down now sends the message that standing for equity is a mistake. I won't apologize for fighting to make this company better." The question that hung unspoken was, could Caldwell Aviation survive this fight? Meanwhile, the anxiety within the company was building. Rachel, now one of Naomi's most trusted voices, brought it to her in private. "People in sales are whispering, some think Richard was right," she said, voice low. "They're scared. They think you're taking the whole ship down with you." Naomi's eyes narrowed. "Then it's time to remind them what we're fighting for." That night, as Naomi sat in her office, she saw it, Richard, live on a primetime interview. With polished lies and veiled condescension, he made his final move. "I wish things could have changed," he said, but Naomi chose power over principle. Naomi didn't rage. She didn't cry. She got ready. The next morning, the press conference was standing room only. Cameras snapped, microphones extended. Everyone expected Naomi to flinch, to beg, to soften. They didn't know her. "There's been a lot of noise," she began, her voice calm, firm. accusations, speculation, lawsuits. But today we deal in truth. On the screen behind her, emails appeared. Directives Richard had signed. Memos. Sales policies rooted in exclusion. One line stood out in bold. Focus on those who fit our brand. Don't waste time on others. Naomi turned back to the crowd. This isn't a witch hunt, it's a reckoning, and the numbers speak louder than any lawsuit. Since implementing our new policies, our revenue has risen by 12%. Why? Because respect scales. Fairness isn't bad for business. It's the future of it. The final line echoed like a gavel. If this company cannot thrive while treating all clients equally, it doesn't deserve to survive. Richard watched the conference from his office, eyes bloodshot, fists clenched. His phone buzzed. Preston Lancaster. You didn't tell me what was really going on, Preston said, cold. Richard's voice cracked. You're not buying this. I don't back losers, Preston said, and hung up. The lawsuit crumbled in court days later. The judge dismissed it, citing lack of evidence and unethical motives. One of Richard's own supporters, a billionaire client, issued a statement. I was misled. I stand with Naomi Caldwell. Reporters mobbed Richard as he left the courthouse. Mr. Whitmore, will you apologize? Do you regret a lawsuit? But Richard had no more words. His empire of illusion had collapsed. Naomi stood in her office as the city lit up behind her. Claudia entered with a smile. The board is calling for full expansion of the new sales model. They're backing you, Naomi. All the way. Terrell followed. You did it. Naomi turned, her eyes fierce but peaceful. I did what had to be done. And now? He asked. She looked out the window again. Now, we make sure this never happens again. Richard, once untouchable, was now isolated. Emails ignored, calls unanswered. His name had become corporate poison. A breaking news alert confirmed it. Major aviation networks blacklist Richard Whitmore. Industry cuts ties permanently. He clicked on the article, a ghost in his own story. He had been erased, not by Naomi, but by his own hubris. Back at Caldwell Aviation, the air was different, lighter, real. The fear was gone, replaced by something else, possibility. Naomi stood in the executive conference room, reviewing the final sales training protocol. Across from her, Elizabeth nodded. We're ready. Donald, once a skeptic, added, we made the right call. At the far end stood Rachel, now manager of the flagship showroom, once silenced, now leading. We'll never go back, Rachel said. No, Naomi agreed, we won't. But the true impact reached beyond Caldwell. The Naomi Caldwell effect was now a phrase in business media. CEOs were questioned, statements were issued. Some companies reached out, asking Naomi to help guide them into this new era. One email read, Naomi, I watched everything. I resisted change for years. Now I see. Let's talk about making this real. Industry-wide. A week later, Naomi attended a gala. The room was filled with power, CEOs, investors, leaders. Terrell leaned close, smiling. You realized you're a symbol now, right? Naomi laughed softly. A symbol? They're not just here to celebrate you. You proved change is possible. She scanned the room. These were people who once ignored these conversations. Now they were listening, learning. She raised her glass. Then let's make sure this isn't the last change we push for. Terrell grinned. Now that's the Naomi I know. The skyline shimmered beyond the ballroom. The storm had passed. But the work was only beginning. Naomi Caldwell proved one truth. Power isn't given. It's taken. And change doesn't wait for permission. It's forced into being by those brave enough to say, enough. Her battle wasn't about ego. It wasn't about revenge. It was about the future, where fairness wasn't a slogan but a structure, where the table didn't shrink but grew. To ask yourself not what Naomi did, but what you would do. Would you stand up, knowing what you'd risk, or would you stay silent? Let us know in the comments. And for more stories of power, justice, and revolution, subscribe, because this was just the beginning.